are back and talking about anxiety and dogs. And I just want to quickly mention the number to call in if you have any questions. 888-418-6890, or maybe you have just some comments or some interesting realizations how maybe your animal made you feel calmer and more relaxed. 888-418-6890. But we have a beautiful caller on, which is right now, I think, on the line. Agatha, are you here?
I'm here, yes.
Excellent. Well, Agatha, thank you so much for calling in. Now, I just before the break mentioned the conundrum that it all sounds nice and good to take on this role of the compassionate, caring, reassuring leader, that competent adult who can just calm your anxiety down. But is that really possible? Is that really doable? Now, Agatha, you had been struggling with anxiety, and we have been working together for a little bit. And well, tell me, is it possible?
I think, yeah, it's absolutely possible. And I think when you're in that anxious state or when you're living in those states, very often it actually feels unimaginable. Like it feels that you'll never be able to change or address that thing. And I think being on the other end of it now, on the other side of it, it's such a relief because you realize that that thing that you thought you were bound to forever, that was a part of you, was just a temporary condition, and that there is really a way to talk your way into a different way of being in this world,
Now, was it for you a journey where you would say, well, looking at this anxiety, it was just something that I had to get over with or talk myself out to, or like, I talk about dog and that anxiety inside of you and having a little bit more a closer and maybe more positive relationship. Was that also what happened to you? In other words, are you still afraid of your anxiety, or do you actually have more compassion for it?
I have a lot more compassion for it. I mean, I think when the trigger hits, I think the instant feeling maybe feels like how it used to be, but the cycle is just so short because there's a benevolent part of you, a compassionate part of you that's there to support that process. So maybe something triggers that situation, but instead of it turning into like a 7-hour fest of anxiety, like there's a whole person now that has space for that anxious person, and I can have a dialogue with it that soothes that thing, and then I'm able to take action from a different place. So I'm not building a life around that kind of anxious, reactive state. I'm building a life from this whole state, and then I'm having richer experiences, and my life keeps getting brighter and warmer because of the ability to be in communion with that anxious self.
Now, you had certainly several triggers, or let's say events also recently, I know from your life, where you could say, well, my anxiety could have been just basically make me housebound or completely imprison me, and and it didn't. And maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
Yeah. And I don't feel embarrassed to share anything, but I recently just started getting involved with somebody, so in a relationship, and that was really hard for me because I had a lot of triggers about how to keep my heart open in relationship to another person, how to stay vulnerable and not shut down. And so my anxiety was going through the roof, more so because I was growing into this new part of my life, and I was being challenged to deal with those old triggers in a really kind of immediate way. And I keep thinking that, like, if I had not had the dialogue that I have now with this part of myself, I wouldn't have even been able to step into this relationship, because I would have been shutting everything down every step of the way that I felt that old pain or that old shame or those old feelings that caused my anxiety. And I wouldn't have allowed myself to have the experiences that are now growing and blossoming from this state of wholeness. I keep saying that word wholeness, but yeah, and it felt hard. It felt hard for me in the moment because, like I think I said, I was expanding to this new part of my life, but I, every single step of the way, had a dialogue for that anxious self. And then when I was able to soothe her or quiet her, I was able to go into the world and have a brand new experience, not the old story, you know?
Yeah, well, that's really powerful because, I think one of the things we often are also feeling is the identity that is the anxiety, where, anxiety
Yeah.
goes in hand with shame and insecurity. And now, when you think
Yeah.
about your own
Yeah.
journey, do you feel like that by addressing where the anxiety came from and understanding more the subconscious patterns and beliefs that were attached to it, that you also found more about yourself that before you didn't see? In other words, was the anxiety a catalyst for you to that wholeness that you're feeling now?
I think I gained so much personal dignity, which I think is like, it's just that's just such a gift. I can't even explain what that's like, which is that there's no parts of anything that have happened to you on your journey that you can't stand behind and love and support and bring with you everywhere you go, that you're not compartmentalized or shunning or hiding certain parts of yourself, that you get to experience the fullness of yourself in the world. I think I was in a box because I was only able to be in my life when I felt that the conditions were right. Do you know what I mean? Like when I felt that I had control of the anxious self, and now I could walk out into the world and be perfect. But now that illusion of perfection kind of fell away, because what came was a deep sense of compassion and dignity for the past, for the old hurts. And the ability to hold those with me with love wherever I go. And I think, even more powerfully than for myself, it's awoken an immense compassion for everyone in my life. I look at other people now, and when I see them struggling or spinning out or getting nervous or having a meltdown, I don't even sit in judgment over them. I have an ability to be compassionate and present to that experience in them. And I've seen that my ability to even do that for them melts that anxious self in them, So it's like has this huge domino effect where that self-love that I've found, it's being offered and it's there for other people as well, So it's like your whole world gets better. Your whole world gets better because you learn how to be compassionate to those parts of yourselves, and then everybody in your life benefits from that because you're able to do that for other people too. And that's what everybody needs, right? At the end of the day, is like the dignity for whatever's happened to them and the understanding and the love and care for that experience, not the shame for that experience,
Well, that's exactly, that's so beautiful that you're saying it, because I believe in the past, and most people would do this when we feel anxious and insecure, and then someone around us is negative. It's not compassion for the people that comes up. It's usually we take it personally and we are more withdrawing, or we are more feeling like more ashamed and more insecure. So the fact that you don't take these negativities or their struggles personally, but you can see through them, and you don't see it as a rejection, you didn't see it as a reflection on you, but you are actually seeing more like, wow, they need a little compassion and kindness. And that's just beautiful. Now, do you feel that you had to somehow develop love for your anxiety to go to that place where you're now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's literally, I had this conversation with a girlfriend of mine that is also working with you, but we were just talking about how, one of the first steps is like when you meet these anxious parts and you realize that like you have inherited, you are their loving parent, and it's not your job. You actually have the ability to soothe that. It's like one of the first steps for me was like I didn't want that responsibility, you know, and then it literally felt like I was sitting with a child in a room that was throwing a tantrum, and the child was me, you know, and it was like, we're going to figure this out, kid, you know, and that was like the first loving thing I could say. And it's, you know, now that dialogue is a lot more loving, but I was telling my friend, you know, if that's the least you can do, if the least you can do is say like, all right, I don't know how to talk to you, but I am here and I'm going to try, you know, that is like step one in that conversation, I think. And I had to go through those were the hard moments. Do you know what I mean? The willingness to sit with myself, you know, the willingness to not numb out, the willingness to not scapegoat, the willingness to not blame someone else for my feelings, you know, the willingness to sit there. And it's like what you were saying earlier. It's like the more that I sat with that part of myself, the more I learned how to trust myself, and she learned how to trust me. And that trust keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And it's a resilience, you know, behind that trust is a resilience, and that resilience is then what feels like calm and ease and all these beautiful things in life that we're seeking that are so far from those anxious states, you know?
Wow, that's really beautifully said. And, you know, it just shows you also that, I mean, when you think about the sliding door phenomenon and you think about you would have kept your more hostile and adverse relationship with anxiety, and you would have not embraced it, and you would have not opened yourself up to it, you would have not all the other experiences that you're describing, because somehow you would have always felt like, well, I'm fragmented in myself, or I'm in my battle with myself, so I don't trust myself. How can I trust even anyone else around me? So it definitely, you know, making peace with anxiety was the first step for you to also have a fuller experience of life.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because if you can't trust yourself, then you can't trust anyone else, and you can't trust life and the experience of being here. And that trust is vital to having the most beautiful experience, you know?
Well, Agatha, thank you so much for calling in. I know that a lot of people are inspired and touched by what you're saying, because you are someone, I think you can really say, you have not only healed your relationship with anxiety, you have grown and expanded beyond it. And that is just such a wonderful way of also understanding that anxiety doesn't have to be a lifelong struggle or something that you feel like burdened with for the rest of your life. You can actually have that powerful emotion, that powerful part inside of you, and have it as a catalyst for your own growth and ultimately coming to yourself. Because like in your case, many people realize, well, I was not current. I wasn't really my true self. I didn't even know what it means to be authentic until I was addressing the pain and that what the anxiety was trying to convey me. And now I know more who I really am. And I think that is really ultimately the purpose of life and the journey that we're here for. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for being my partner on this healing journey. And I just want to say, it's like I knew that when I had heard you for the first time, I could just sense that there was something in your voice, in your approach, that we were going to be able to handle it, you know. And I had spent so much time searching for a way to heal these parts and to become this full version of myself. And in those earlier moments, it just always felt like I was going to be changed to those selves forever, those hard selves, and never feel the ease and comfort I was looking for. And I got to the bottom of it, to the source of it, with your help, and I'm grateful and appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you very much. And I have deep gratitude for your commitment, because that's one of the things that also is a parallel to how to be with your dog. You have to be consistent, you have to be committed, and you have to be compassionate. So thank you for showing up in all those ways. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you, me too.
Well, there are questions people have been asking. There was a message that I got, and it was exactly the message about that fear of being overwhelmed by your anxiety, so you don't really know what to do with it. It's like that sense of, well, it's all nice and good to befriend your anxiety, but what if you have a panic attack, or what if you just feel overcome by it, and what do you do then? And well, the answer is basically that it's a little bit like, if you would say, well, I only really think about losing weight when my blood pressure is, skyrocketing and my knees are hurting, and as soon as the pain is gone, I'm ignoring my body again. Or you would say, I only learn how to drive on black ice. It's these intense moments that are the challenges. I completely understand it. But anxiety is present probably much more often than in those moments when you feel like your heart is jumping out of your chest. Anxiety is probably like an undercurrent that you wake up with. There may be a constant little tension inside of you. You may be able to hear negative thoughts at all times, and you may feel that anxiety is something that is like the noise of the refrigerator. You just try to tune it out, but somehow it's still there. And that is what you need to address. That is where you want to start. You want to get a relationship with your anxiety so that it doesn't go to the point of the panic. See, panic attacks are in some ways like the pressure cooker that you have kept closed, and you put more and more pressure of stress and anxiety into it until it's just overflowing or exploding. And so, in other words, it's more unaddressed anxiety, and it's not really the main symptom. So be aware that in order to get a relationship with the anxiety, just like you would want to get a relationship with your dog, you want to go to the places where it's not out of control, but where there are just little inklings and moments where it starts. And that's something that you can do by, for example, taking note of your negative thoughts, by, for example, when you do have that sense of, well, there is an anxiety that gets triggered in certain situations, that you understand what those situations mean and how they may be leading you back to some limiting beliefs or traumatic events, and then you're learning how to resolve those, maybe through the book that I wrote, or maybe through the video seminar, or maybe through individual sessions. And you can also notice then that there is something that when you spiral and when you feel like, okay, I'm maybe putting too much on my plate, or I'm ignoring myself again because I'm making other people more important than myself, that those are the moments where your anxiety is barking at you, and then you just take care of yourself. You may want to sit down. You may want to just take some breath, learn to meditate. You may want to see that, well, I'm actually always getting anxious when I eat something bad or when I don't eat at all. There are things that the anxiety is trying to convey to you, which may be about your health and your balance and staying in your power. So look at it, understand it, remind yourself, the anxiety wants to support me. It doesn't really want to hurt me. And with that attitude, you can also start to befriend your anxiety. And that's something that Agatha so beautifully expressed, that her anxiety led her to herself. Addressing the anxiety, understanding the anxiety, listening to it, made her actually open up to her and to many of her potential and abilities, and ability to have compassion and love and acceptance for others that she wouldn't really know before that she had. And so, many people told me that the anxiety made them a better person. So there is really nothing for you to fear. It's just something to understand and communicate with. Now, there was also another little note I got on the chat board. Basically, the question is, in my profession, I'm a lawyer. I never show my anxiety to my clients, even when I could demonstrate my empathy. How do you recommend I share without creating more anxiety in my clients? Now, I don't believe that necessarily sharing anxiety with someone is, at all times appropriate. Depends on the relationship. So when you are in the relationship, let's say, for example, I'm working with a lot of clients, and believe it or not, I do have anxiety at times. So there are times when I feel maybe stressed or nervous or overwhelmed. So what I share is more like those situations and how I dealt with them and how I learned from those situations. What I share is also with people that I'm working with or I'm close with, when the anxiety is telling me something, when the anxiety is telling me this doesn't feel right, or I'm feeling like I'm, maybe putting too much pressure on myself in this situation, or I'm having too high expectations, or whatever it is. So if you have a relationship with your clients where you feel the anxiety is telling you something, maybe it's about demands of your client you feel uncomfortable with, and you feel like, well, this is not really sitting well with me, that's a little bit against my values, then the anxiety needs to be translated into that, what it actually tries to tell you. And then you become the advocate for the anxiety. Or maybe you feel like there's too high of an expectation from your client, and that creates anxiety, then you want to address that issue. So rather than just speaking about what you feel, you take responsibility for translating and understanding where the feelings come from, what they're telling you, and then you address and respond to those messages. Now, all of this, of course, can go on forever. We have so much to talk about when it comes to anxiety, and there's so much to learn, and it's such a rich topic. But I hope I left you not only with a more positive connection to anxiety, but also with some motivation to do something about it, because as Agatha and many of my clients are telling you, anxiety is not just about getting rid of it. Anxiety and really learning to heal and outgrow it is such an exciting journey that ultimately really leads you to a more expanded and empowered version of yourself. So the outcome and who you are at the end of the journey is so much more than you can even imagine is possible for you. So I hope you get excited about the possibilities of getting closer to your anxiety, seeing it more as a guide, as an ally, befriending you with it, and then seeing what's possible through addressing it, responding to it, and opening your heart towards it. Because when you open your heart to your anxiety, when you have compassion for your struggles, ultimately you really learn to love yourself unconditionally.